Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. We're excited to have you here. My name is Mary Jane Suarez, and I'm the program director for WiCyS. And we're going to be talking with the gentleman and also the executive director for WiCyS regarding our research that we just came together and helped this last year. And let me go ahead and introduce everyone that's going to be speaking today. Will Marco is the founder and the CEO of FourOne Insights and a brilliant strategist regarding cybersecurity and employment within the field. Lynn Dome, most of you probably already know, beloved within cybersecurity, the executive director with WiCyS. She's got 25 years within the field and is a true champion for making sure that people have access into the field and are successful within their cybersecurity careers. And then finally, CU, who is a well-known strategist and has worked in the White House, and he'll be bringing some rich commentary to the discussion today. So Lynn, I'll let you kick it off.
Great. Thank you so much, MJ. Just to give everyone a brief overview of the WiCyS organization, WiCyS, and we go by our acronym, which is WiCYS. We pronounce it WiCyS, like we sisters. But Women in Cybersecurity is a 501c3 member-based nonprofit with a mission to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. We have close to 12,000 members and representation in over 100 countries. In addition to that, we have close to 70 professional affiliates, which are also our satellite organizations who are all around the world. And we have over 350 student chapters. So what we do is what MJ just described is we provide accessibility and opportunity for individuals to not only get into cybersecurity, but really importantly, stay and have career growth and advancement opportunities extend from it. And that's why the importance of today's conversation is so critical, as we're always looking into the workforce initiatives and what could we be doing differently that will help drive the change that's needed. So overall, everything within the WiCyS organization is done through various layers on programming, media engagement, speaking engagements, multiple events. Last year alone, we had over 100 events and we engaged over 50,000 participants. We have career resources and community building opportunities. And we do comparable representation of programming efforts in early career, mid-career, and senior positions, either in technical space or leadership development. And we owe all that thanks to our strategic partners, with their tier one being Akamai, Amazon, Bloomberg, Cisco, Ford, Google, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Palo Alto Networks, and SentinelOne. There was a time I used to read every strategic partner on this page, but I simmered down, and now we just stick with the top tier ones. But you could all see here, we have an ecosystem of over 60 strategic partners that continue to fund and support. That's been the most critical piece in cybersecurity, and that's that human element. So throughout today's presentation, you have incredible individuals that are going to be talking about the wonderful research that they've provided within the WiCyS organization. But queue up your questions. So you see at the bottom of your screen that you have the chat feature. So as those questions come in, there's going to be folks behind the scenes that can answer those questions or queue them up to be asking us those questions live. And MJ is our program director at the organization. She will be asking us all those questions as we are done wrapping up today's presentation. So please don't be shy. Put those questions in the chat and we will get to it. And then lastly, if you're not already a part of the WiCyS organization, we encourage you to do so or subscribe to our newsletter. We roll out programming and events and many different initiatives and scholarships at a very rapid rate. So the best way to stay tuned in and tapped into all offerings of WiCyS is that newsletter. We love it. We have over 43,000 subscribers and would like you all to be a part of that as well. So today's conversation, the WiCyS Edge, a human-centric approach in the era of automation. I swear to you, Will, CU, and myself did not get a memo that said wear a blue-collared shirt. We all just intuitively knew that today was a blue-collared, like button-down shirt day, and here we are. We're making it very aesthetically, perfectly pleasing for this wonderful webinar experience, right? So what I want to talk about is that it's within the tradition of the WiCyS community that we carry forward this very human-centric, inclusive, and ethically grounded approach on the various workforce needs by offering a broad spectrum of perspectives. So in cybersecurity, in order to solve challenges that have never previously existed before, we not only all genders, but identities, ethnicities, backgrounds, and experiences, and more. We need all hands on deck. And that's to help break up the groupthink mindset. So I'm sure you all have heard of groupthink 1,000 times before. If you've seen any of my presentations, you know that I'm always one that's putting it up here just as a point of reflection that groupthink is a psychological phenomenon in which people strive for the consensus within the group. In many cases, people will set aside their own personal beliefs to adopt the opinion of the rest of the group. And it is all evidence shows that groups with the same mindset have that all evidence shows that systemic errors are made with the groups of the same mindset. It's because it provides this illusion of invulnerability because there's no diverse opinion to make anyone think otherwise. And in cybersecurity, it's a security risk not to have the unique perspective that all individuals bring forward. So right now, the cybersecurity workforce is being reshaped by two converging forces. That's rapid digitization and long-term demographic constraint. And that rapid digitization is new technologies, expanded regulatory expectations, deeper integration between cyber and core business function. All of that is raising the bar on what organizations are expecting from their teams, all at the same time as we're having these long-term demographic constraints, such as an aging population. 2030 is when the youngest of baby boomers are going to be reaching retirement age. And it's not to say that all baby boomers are going to be retiring in 2030, but shortly thereafter, there is going to be this exodus. And are we building up a resilient workforce that's really going to be strong enough to handle this type of transition from going from a boomer to a Zoomer, a Gen Z workforce? And what does that resiliency look like? In addition to that, with the long-term demographic constraints, we have lower birth rates and immigration rates, and then this falling labor force participation. And so what that's doing is that it's really narrowing the pathways and making our workforce very structurally fragile. And so when we're narrowing our pathways and then we're stacking groupthink on top of it, what we're doing is we're losing our ability to outsmart evolving threats. And what happens to our resiliency when we're able to widen those pathways and really create more accessibility? And that is what WiCyS organization does. Our evidence shows, and the evidence that we're going to be showcasing today, that when we empower a workforce, that it really has multiple advantages in building a much higher, better performing team. And so WiCyS is the 501c3 that helps make that happen. We listen to our community. We understand what is our employer partners need, and we're the catalyst to build out programming efforts to bridge those gaps. So a brief history of the WiCyS timeline is we started in 2014 just solely as a conference. Our founder, Dr. Ambreen Siraj, was at Tennessee Tech University at the time, and she discovered that there was 11% of women in the workforce. And she was even interested that it was as high as 11% of women in cybersecurity. So she thought, if all these women exist out there, let's bring them together in a technical conference so we could learn and grow in that capacity. But in 2018, it became really obvious that there was so much more work to do. And that's when we became this 501c3 member-based nonprofit. And we knew that we could recruit all we want and build that pipeline. And we did so very well. And so did many other organizations. But in order to really, truly make an impact on the workforce, we had to peel back that layer and understand what is retention and career growth and advancement opportunities extending from it. Because if we're recruiting into the workforce and people are leaving the workforce, then we're not making an impact that it deserves. So we really started taking a deeper dive and look into what are those retention efforts and what is WiCyS doing differently because of it, which is what led us to partnering with Illyria back in 2023. Now, I'm sharing all this with you today, and I know it's a lot of information, but it's kind of level setting the conversation. This is how we got to the conversation with Will and CU and FourOne Insights that's going to lead to them presenting all the data with you. But this background history is really, really important because as WiCyS was shifting into what are we doing within the workforce to really drive the impact and the change that's needed, we had to understand the retention a little bit further. So in 2023, we partnered with Illyria Research. And what they do is they quantify the experiences of exclusion to identify the state of inclusion. And that was when we first, in the first time ever in cybersecurity, that we really had this eye-opening data on what is retention. And for the sake of today's conversation, there's 3 key takeaways that came from that research. Is 1, women in cybersecurity were at a glass ceiling between 6 to 10 years within their career. 2, the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities was a very high barrier within for women in cybersecurity. And the reason why that data point is so interesting to us is because Illyria, that is partnered with many different industries, putting together many different state of inclusion benchmark reports, that the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities was not as high for any other industry other than for the Women in Cybersecurity report. So that's something that we had to pay special attention to. And then the third key takeaway is that women in cybersecurity were 5 times more likely to have experiences of exclusion come from their direct managers. And that's going to come up again as we get a little closer to Will and see you finally getting to the presentation. But that's a really important thing to note here. And so in 2024, in the early the year of 2024, is when this research report came out. And of course, it got a lot of media attention. I was really busy doing a lot of presentations, doing podcasts, and doing media engagements, sharing this information because it was revolutionary. We finally had data and pain points around what is the retention for women in cybersecurity. People were really interested in the research project. But after one of my presentations that I was doing, and I was at Black Hat and RSAC and many different conferences, someone approached me and they said, well, women in cybersecurity are at around 6 to 10 years within their career. Could it be a performance issue? And so you only had to ask me that once. And it started me to think about who can we partner with to be able to better understand how are the skill sets of WiCyS members compared to non-WiCyS members. And at that point, we partnered with N2K, and now we're partnering with SkillRex, who does a hard skills assessment with over 60 core cybersecurity competencies. And the 3 items to note is that it is a hard skills assessment. We are covering the 60 core cybersecurity competencies, and that WiCyS members are out there killing it. When it comes to a hard skills assessment in cybersecurity, that WiCyS members are outperforming non-WiCyS members at a rate of 21% for early career, 14.5% for mid-career, and 8% in senior career. And we call that the WiCyS Edge. And WiCyS members are also leading the charge when it competencies, most importantly, related to AI, such as critical thinking, artificial intelligence, database administration, threat analysis, risk management, data analysis, data management, cryptography, and all of the above. And so we're really happy with those findings. So imagine in 2024 and early 2024, when the conversation really started shifting to skills-based hiring, skills-based advancement, merit-based advancement, that WiCyS was like right on. Skills are the ultimate equalizer, and we are here for it. We had already a few years of data that showed that WiCyS members are out there killing it. We are outperforming our peers. So at this point, when we're talking about skills-based advancement, our members are going to rise because they got the skills and we have the data to show it. But time and time again, when I would be out there and I would be talking to employers, I would be asking them, well, you have skills-based assessments and we're talking about skills-based advancement. We're in full support of it. but who is making the decisions? How is the decision making being made for individuals to have that promotion, to advance within their skills? And time after time after time again, it was reported back to me, well, we leave that to the discretion of the manager. So if you go back to what I showed earlier in the slides with Illyria, that women in cybersecurity were 5 times more likely to have experiences extend from their direct managers, you can see why we needed to dive a little deeper and understand this a little further, and then provide information to how really everyone could be moving the needle forward in a very genuine way. And we're going to have Will and see you discuss that further. But when we partnered with FourOne Insights, our ask was very crystal clear. What is the return on investment for mid-career women in cybersecurity? And so I will pass the mic on over to Will and see you to take that conversation from here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing that great introduction and providing such wonderful context for the research that we did together. And I couldn't be more excited to share this with the broader community, because I've been analyzing the cybersecurity workforce now for about 13 years. And I really think this is one of the most impactful pieces of research that I've ever been a part of, because for the entirety of the time that I've been looking at the cybersecurity workforce, we've been hearing people say, oh, there's a talent shortage, there's a gap, what do we do? How do we close this? And most of the solutions that people have offered up are focused on the supply side of the equation, which is important. We need better training programs. We need people to know that there are strong opportunities in cyber. That also matters, but it really ignored the other half of the equation, the employer side. We also need to be able to provide employers with a set of best practices to help them be more effective hirers and managers of cybersecurity talent. And when I saw all the research coming out from WiCyS that was really focused on trying to help expand the aperture of the talent pipeline, while also highlighting the value of the skill sets that WiCyS members have, I said, well, I think this is a great opportunity to try to build off of that and solve a real challenge in the field, while also providing employers with that blueprint for how to implement skills-based practices in the most effective and financially advantageous way. So really excited to be able to share with you some of the findings. And just to provide some more context, I want to kick it over to my co-author, CU, who is definitely the more intelligent of the two, as you'll see in a few seconds, to provide some additional context behind why we did this research and why now is the right time to do it.
Thank you so much, Will, and thank you so much for that great introduction, Lynn. I think it's good for us to kind of take some time back and take a look at, in 2021 and 2022, when a lot of folks are talking about skills-based hiring and skills-based advancement. And all of us here in this call push for skills-based hiring, skills-based advancement. But one of the things that when I met Lynn, she's always reminding me that, like, hey, there's all these other women who are not able to sort of like move up, in the career ladder. And we're like, oh, as we're pushing all the skills-based advancement and skills-based hiring, what can we do to make sure that that is really happening? And what was clear to us is that we actually don't have a lot of data to base on skills-based hiring and skills-based advancement, especially in cybersecurity. So a couple years later, when I met Lynn again, I said, you know what, Lynn, you are right. There are a lot of people who with the skills, but we're not opening the pathways for them to advance. So this is sort of like why when we approach Lynn and say, you know what, we need to take a look at what is the ROI, right? What is the return on investment to have skills-based advancement? And if we can do that and quantify that, perhaps we can open up the pathways for more folks to advance based on their skills. With that, Will, let's start the presentation.
All right. So first question here is, well, what did we do to try and unpack this question of what is the ROI of skills-based hiring? What are some of those best practices? And so what we did was last year, we started by interviewing a number of subject matter experts across the WiCyS network, including CISOs and others across the cybersecurity ecosystem. And we were able to take some of the qualitative insights from that, distill it into a survey that actually asked people, well, what are some of the talent practices that your organization is currently using? And then we were able to pair that with some workforce data that we were able to collect at FourOne Insights on those companies, figure out what were the hiring outcomes in terms of how difficult it was to fill positions, in terms of how long they were able to retain people, and other workforce outcomes that we were then able to use to tie back to the talent practices that organizations with the best outcomes were actually utilizing, so that we could use that to calculate the ROI of those best practices. So when we did this, what did we find? Well, the first thing we found was that overwhelmingly, the talent practices that were most impactful for both organizations and individuals were both skills-based, as we suspected, and talent-friendly. And what we mean by this is these are talent practices that really help individuals grow and advance within an organization. These are things like mentorships and providing personalized learning and training pathways tied back to the skill sets that people can be developing to advance themselves. It relates to stretch assignments and other practices that really help people advance and develop new capabilities that will help them both within their current role and in other roles in the future. And what we found is that the highest impact talent practices that organizations could be adopting, on average, could help companies realize over $127,000 of cost savings for the average cybersecurity worker over the course of their employment with that company. And that is a huge financial benefit to organizations who adopt some of these practices. And we also found that not only is it good for companies and their bottom lines, but it's also great for individuals and women in particular who are looking to advance to higher levels in cybersecurity. We found that many of these practices, on average, could help women advance into cybersecurity leadership positions 10 to 20% at 10 to 20% higher rates than what we saw in organizations that were not implementing these same practices. And we also saw that many of the survey respondents, they said, we would love to have companies who offered some of these talent practices. We'd be more likely to work for companies that offer these types of practices because they're signaling to us that they're investing in us. And so we found that these really are some win-win opportunities for organizations to both benefit individuals by helping them advance, benefit women in particular in cyber by making it more likely that they can move into cybersecurity leadership positions, and at the same time, benefit companies themselves and their bottom lines by virtue of better hiring outcomes, which lead to more productive and more loyal workers. So that's the good news. Bad news from all this was that the most impactful practices were also some of the least likely for organizations to be adopting. We found that adoption of these practices was incredibly uneven, and that in general, the more impactful a practice was, often the less likely it was that organizations were actually implementing those practices. In fact, for the highest impact practices, none of them had more than roughly half of survey respondents saying their companies are currently adopting those practices. What's worse is that when they actually are adopting some of these skills-based practices, they're often not doing so in the most effective way because they're still relying upon subjective assessments of proficiency and skills within their workforce. Lynn mentioned earlier how when she went and talked to companies, she heard that a lot of them were saying, yeah, we do skills-based hiring, but at the end of the day, it was coming back to managerial discretion, which comes with a ton of inherent biases and other challenges that really water down the benefit of skills-based hiring. And we found the same thing in our data as well. We found that the majority of employers who said they were using skills-based hiring in some capacity, they're assessing skills using subjective managerial assessments of their people. And that's just going to continue to ingrain those managerial biases in the skills-based hiring process, and you're not going to be able to wring as much value out of it because it's going to be garbage in, garbage out with the skills data that you're utilizing. And so we found that there's still a long way to go for many organizations who are looking to adopt some of these best practices if they actually want to utilize them to their fullest potential. But one of the things that we also found, which was a silver lining in all this, is that there are opportunities for organizations to partner with third parties such as WiCyS to help ease adoption of some of these best practices and implement them across their organization. So I'll kick it back over to CU to talk about some of the things that we found on this point as well.
Yeah, I think look, we're not going to repeat all the goodness about, third-party partnership that you can see on the slide, but the key thing here is that as an organization is implementing these processes, they don't have to do it alone, right? Like you have third-party partnership that can really help you out. And this is where WiCyS is really, so like the benefit of WiCyS is really clear, is that, if on the company side, if you're partnering, then you can fill jobs faster. You see more folks serve longer, and then you avoid productivity loss. But on members, right? For those who are members, and especially based on a survey, the value is that, you build more professional connections, you receive research and insights, right? These are the companies, right? And you learn and help members also learn new skills. So this all to sort of say is that on one end, you have all the skills advancement, sort of like the implementation of what's possible. But on the other hand, you don't have to do it alone. The partnership with organizations such as WiCyS would really help not just the company, but also the members and your employees as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great illustration of how this is another one of those win-win scenarios where if you're able to partner with third parties such as WiCyS, who are able to provide resources to organizations and to individuals, then it benefits both the companies and the professionals who are looking to advance within the field in a myriad of ways. And so I think this is a great way to help organizations, maybe especially the smaller companies who don't have the resources of the big Fortune 500 multinationals, to still utilize some of these best practices to both their benefit as well as the benefit of their employees. So another thing that I'll mention, which is some silver lining here, is that although many organizations are not implementing the best practices, if you're an employer and you're not already utilizing some of those highest impact talent practices, that is a golden opportunity for you to differentiate your employer value proposition relative to some of your peers, because you know that those high impact practices, they're not being utilized by everybody. And so if you can gain first mover advantage and be one of the relatively few employers that does implement those high impact practices, that is a fantastic way to differentiate your capabilities and your employee value proposition relative to some of your peers. And so to help organizations have a quick cheat sheet for which of those talent practices are most likely to help them differentiate their talent management practices from those of their peers, we created this matrix, which we call the talent practice prioritization matrix, to help organizations quickly identify what were those high impact practices that both have the largest financial impact, but were also the most underutilized. And so these include practices such as offering mentorship programs, providing personalized learning and training pathways, as well as using skills to inform a variety of workforce planning needs. We find that organizations who do adopt these, they're far more likely to have favorable talent outcomes. And so I would strongly encourage any organization who's thinking about enhancing their talent management practices to look at this chart and try to figure out which of these are best suited to the realities of your organization and that can help move the needle on some of the talent priorities that you have, while also helping to differentiate your talent practices from those of your competitors. So those are really the key findings from the research, but we also didn't just want to leave employers hanging and say, well, here is what we found, now figure out what to do with it. We also wanted to distill the findings from this research into a set of best practices that we could hand off to employers and they can adopt today to start improving their talent management practices, both to the benefit of individuals on their teams and to the benefit of their bottom lines. So there are a few best practices I'll highlight here that we called out in the research. And the first is this continuous talent optimization framework we developed, which the idea here is that we wanted to give employers a repeatable process and set of steps that they could take to continuously enhance how they are managing their cybersecurity workforce. I won't go through all these in detail. Gotta give you some reason to go read the report, of course. But the idea here is that you're taking this process and you have this virtuous feedback cycle, ranging from assessing what's going on right now to building a plan to improve it, to actually executing that plan, and then evaluating and starting the process all over again so that you can implement best practices that'll serve your needs as those needs evolve when it comes to your cybersecurity workforce. The second set of best practices and recommendations that we gave employers was to make sure that you're actually aligning these talent practices to your talent priorities and your strategic goals. It's one thing to say that mentorships on average are the best way to drive favorable hiring outcomes, but for some organizations, maybe another talent practice is going to better suit their needs or solve the immediate talent challenges that they have. And so we also help to provide this cheat sheet for organizations that helps you figure out, okay, if I'm looking to reduce hiring difficulty versus increasing internal mobility versus increasing retention, whatever your goal may be, you can quickly see which of the talent practices we evaluated that moved the needle the most on that particular goal. We also recommended that you think about these practices in terms of both top-down and bottom-up opportunities, because different organizations are going to have different cultures. In some cases, there's going to be strong centralized leadership pushing for some of these changes. In other cases, maybe not. But you can still find ways to empower people across your organization, even if there isn't a centralized push for some of these strategies, so that you're still able to reap the benefit of some of the best practices, regardless of where you sit within the organization. So the second thing I would encourage employers is to figure out what are your talent priorities, what are the talent challenges that you're facing, and then work backwards from that to figure out which practices are going to best mitigate some of those challenges and improve the talent outcomes you care about the most. Now, kick it over to CU one more time to also talk a little bit about what we found when it comes to how you should actually try to implement skills-based hiring, leveraging the best-in-class data that is available to you.
Well, I mean, look, when talk about skills assessments, folks think about like, hey, are we going to do like one particular test or whatever? But as it turns out, the best ones are, it can be vendor neutral, and that's actually a better idea because you don't want to have bias that's built in any specific product, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing that we want to push for is that we want it to be rooted in real world experience. So, Will mentioned something about stretch assignments and stuff like that earlier. Those are the real experience that we want. So if we want to do skills assessments, assess on real world conditions, the person can demonstrate the skills and also learn the skills on the job when they are doing the work. So those are the things that we like to kind of push for. Go ahead, Will.
Great. Well, and then the last thing there we go. The last thing that I'll just call out before wrapping this up is that I think that when you hear about all these talent practices, if you're an employer, it might feel overwhelming and you might not know where to start. And I just want to leave you with this, that wherever you are in your talent management journey, there are steps that you can take which will be high impact. In some cases, you might just need to take a crawl, walk, run approach. And that doesn't mean that you have to jump all the way to adopting, skills-based strategic workforce planning or building out personalized learning pathways for everyone in your organization. Maybe just start by telling managers, hey, find opportunities for stretch assignments for all of your people. Anyone could do that very simply. Some cases, it might just be, hey, let's go partner with someone else like WiCyS or another external organization that can help us start to reap some of the benefits from these best practices without having to completely change how we do talent management internally already. And then from there, you can start to stack on top of those initial incremental practices, more and more robust transformative practices that can continue to move the needle internally. So I think the last recommendation I'd say is wherever you are, just take a step. Start doing something to try and move the needle. Figure out which of these talent practices is going to be easiest for you to adopt given the operational and cultural realities of your organization, and then use that as a launch pad for more strategies and interventions in the future. So,
and I'll just add one more thing. I think we'll touch on a very great point, which is about the culture, the organization reality. In some of the big organizations, you may be incremental in the larger organization, but could be transformative in a small organization, right? So this is sort of like things are uneven just because, there exist stretch assignments in some other parts of the organization doesn't mean they can't have stretch assignments in your part of the organization as well. So we want to encourage folks to kind of think about, what Will was saying is based on where you're at, what you could do today, and this is the menu and the sliding scale that you can kind of achieve. And especially in larger organizations, we understand things can move a little bit slower, but you may be able to make a difference in your own local organization. You have more direct influence and control over.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic call out and a great way to close it out. I think there's no one size fits all talent strategy for any organization. The reality is you need to figure out what's going to be best within the context of your organization. And whatever the answer is, there's a talent practice that you can start adopting today that'll move the needle both for your bottom line as well as for the career opportunities for folks within your organization. So with that, I will pause and hand it back to Lynn to help bring us home.
Thanks, Will and Sue. Appreciate that information of the best practices and how everyone can start taking those little steps for that transformative change. That's really, really important, because this is the cybersecurity talent paradox that we're faced with today. And we have this surplus of talent in the early career. We're also stacking it with the AI disruption of those junior roles that's leading to this deficit of skills and talented individuals in mid and senior career positions. And so all along, as we're talking about the cybersecurity workforce, is that this critical workforce shortage. You're seeing here that it's not this workforce shortage that everyone is speaking of, but rather it's this skills shortage. Skills is where it's at, and this is really important for all of us to be paying attention to. Cybersecurity practitioners, for their career growth, for their advancement, but a very important leadership is they're building the resilient workforce that's needed and necessary to navigate through the rapidly changing environment. So we are seeing this cybersecurity talent paradox. We're all saying the same thing: ISACA, ISC2, GIAC, SANS, Lightcast, CyberSeek. They're all talking about that it's the supply ratio. As a matter of fact, Lightcast and CyberSeek say it's a 74% supply ratio, meaning that companies are only finding qualified candidates 74% of the roles that they need to fill. And SANS Institute in their latest workforce study has stated that only 60% of organizations believe that their existing teams right now have the skills needed to defend against the current threats. And so as we're looking at skills and what does skills-based advancement means to you all, the differentiator here and what makes the difference here is your leadership, your ability to be able to understand this information, your ability to be able to go to our website, pull down the report, understand the best practices to drive the change that's needed, and then make your decision on how valuable is your retention, was your skill development, and what's needed for you to move that forward. For us and WiCyS, we know our data. You could go to our website and check out our data on the WiCyS Edge and the Employer's Advantage, but we have our WiCyS members are outperforming non-WiCyS members by that 14.5% on the average. We also have 20% higher levels of critical thinking, and according to Haystack Solutions, critical thinking is the cornerstone to success in cybersecurity. In addition to that, FourOne Insights has pulled down a report that WiCyS members have a 32% lower attrition rate than non-WiCyS members. And according to Lyria, that WiCyS members that are employed by WiCyS strategic partners have a 64% higher levels of satisfaction. And all of this is coming up to the really critical data point that Will and CU presented on, is that return on investment to the tune of over $125,000 per employee per tenure. So the data is real and the impact is real, and effective leaders are really shaping what's needed to move this workforce forward by utilizing not only their skill sets needed, but also the power skills that is needed in this AI era as well, which is the ethical nuance, the ethical judgment, relational leadership, building relationships, emotional connections, narrative synthesis. All this is really critically important, and as while we're taking this human-centric approach on moving the workforce forward. So with that, I know I need like a glass of water or something. I'm stumbling over my words right now, but I got it out. All right. With that, I'm going to pass the mic on over to MJ. We had some questions to come in for Will and CU, and if you could go ahead and take it from here, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for that great presentation. And we do have a couple good questions in here. And one of them actually stole my thunder because this was a question I was going to ask, but one of our members asked anyway. And it said, given the current state of the field, if a person has all the skills and all the prerequisites that they know they need to be successful in the field, how do you navigate the job market being an older adult with this blockage that's occurring? Like, what are some good tips and tricks in that area? I have a few of my own opinions, but since you guys are experts, I'll let you guys go.
Yeah, happy to take a first crack at that. But I think, I wouldn't say that there are any magic bullets, but I would say that there are multiple things that you can do to increase the likelihood that you find success. One is, you mentioned that sounds like you might already have the skills that you need, but those skills are going to evolve. We have found that every 2 years or so in cybersecurity, roughly a quarter of key skill requirements shift, which means it's really a moving target. And the more that you can proactively upskill yourself and continuously ensure that you have the latest and greatest skills and employers value the most, that's going to increase the likelihood that you're always relevant in the eyes of employers. But beyond that, we also recognize that sometimes it's not enough to just have the skills that you need. And I would say that you also need to be able to really give concrete demonstrations of what you're able to do. So depending upon where you are in your career, that could take different forms. If you're early on in your career, the more that you can demonstrate on-the-job experience or project-based work that really gives a clear illustration of what you're able to do, the better. I've heard of people, for example, who they weren't able to get their foot in the door right off the bat out of school, and they ended up volunteering for local nonprofits or churches or government agencies or other people who allowed them to cut their teeth, who otherwise wouldn't have been able to gain access to the expertise that they were bringing to the field. And so I'd say be proactive in figuring out where you can gain that experience, even if it's not in a traditional paid role at first. The last thing I'd say is sometimes it's not just what you know, it's who you know. And the more that you can network, and find other people within the community who can help you meet the right people you need to know in order to open more doors for you, the better. That's one of the reasons why organizations like WiCyS are so effective for people, because it forces you to get out there and meet people when you go to a WiCyS meetup. And it allows you to network in a forum that's supportive and encouraging of people to enter into the field. So again, I don't know that any one of those is going to be the magic bullet for anybody, but I think that the more that you can take some of those steps, the greater the likelihood that you find success in your career endeavors.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, the only thing I would add is look, I want to acknowledge how tough the job market is for a lot of the people in cybersecurity right now. We don't have a magic bullet, but finding new ways to demonstrate the skills is definitely the way to go, especially when you have industries they're not the industries that are not as sort of like advanced in cybersecurity. They might be more open to some free help or cheaper help. I'm thinking about things like critical infrastructure, hospitals or K-12 schools, your own school districts. Perhaps there could be ways that you could also both contribute to the community and then maybe get like a smaller consultant project to both demonstrate your skill, like learn a new skill, demonstrate it, but also help the community a little bit. I think those are some of the ways that maybe we can tie folks over to the sort of like the next wave of hopefully a better job market. But again, I understand the job market is really tough. We hope that some of these ideas will work out. The final thing I would say is that it may be also good to kind of explore, one of the things that I've been trying to push for is like folks are experts. Maybe you want to consider being a trainer themselves in some of the content. There are folks that you can kind of, I encourage WiCyS members to look into being a trainer for DEF CON or other organizations that might be hiring trainers. So by training something, that could be a good way to kind of show off your skills, and also write about some of these new technology advancements and how that, from your experience, kind of impacts cybersecurity. I feel like that's another way that I've started seeing some folks doing as they navigate this difficult transition. And good luck.
I think another perspective on this is something that I'm constantly telling the people that I mentor or I come into contact with as they're interviewing. You're interviewing the organization just as much as they're interviewing you. To ensure that it's a good fit, we've shown you the data, that skills-based assessment is what's going to be the thing that's going to make you successful in that organization, that's going to make you feel connected, that's going to make sure that you get promoted as you should, and it's not going to be somebody that's doing it based on feelings. Ask those questions in the interview. How do you guys make a decision on who gets promoted? Do you have a mentorship program? Do you have an ERG for women? Or if there's another type of ERG that you might be interested in, do you have a learning pathway? If someone wants to go from a SOC analyst 1 to a SOC analyst 2, do you guys have those learning pathways already laid out so that I can use those as a way to charter my growth? So I think that might be a good one also, is as you're engaging in the job market, asking those questions to see if those organizations actually have those tools in place already, since we know that those are the tools that you need in order to be successful within the field.
And also know that you're not alone, that the majority of individuals that are in cybersecurity right now have navigated their way either into cybersecurity, either from technical or non-technical pathways. And so tap into the WiCyS resources. Each and every program, even our hands-on training and our CTFs, we all have this cohort experience for a very good reason, because your network is so meaningful to you. So not only in a mentor-mentee program is it a cohort, but if you're in a CTF, or if you're in a training program, or if you're in a leadership development program, we're also surrounding you with another cohort, so that you have multiple areas of resources of this network for you to tap into. And then continue to, carve out that pathway through utilizing your experiences, your skills, the resources that are at your fingertips, to MJ's point. Know this data and to be able to interview the organizations that you're interviewing with, and then advocate for yourself every step of the way.
Yeah. I love the data because it's so well-rounded. It gives you a perspective. If you're an employer, what can you do? If you're an employee, what you should be looking for. So it's not just through a singular lens, like there is something to be garnered from everyone, which I think that's why it's so valuable. We've got a question in here. Why is the job market challenging right now? Is it because of the growing implementation of AI?
Who's going to take that one first?
Go ahead, Will.
I'm happy to take a first crack at this. So, this is one of the paradoxes of the cybersecurity workforce right now, where on the one hand, we've heard for a decade plus that employers say we can't find enough cybersecurity workers, but then we're also increasingly hearing people say, wait, I got a degree, or I worked in cyber, and now I'm struggling to find opportunities. What gives? And it seems like there's a disconnect between what you hear from the employers and what you hear from the individuals. When we've actually tried to look at this and quantify what might be going on here, a couple of things have stood out to us. One is that although we see evidence of a cybersecurity talent shortage broadly, it is not uniformly distributed across the market. We actually see a fairly large surplus of early career talent, because we told everybody for a long time there were tons of opportunities in cybersecurity, go get a degree, and unfortunately, a lot of people listened. It's not a bad thing, but it becomes a bad thing when you don't see enough early career opportunities being provided by employers. And we have found that employers, they really have not opened many entry-level opportunities to the field for many workers. And so I think that one of the challenges here is that we need to communicate to employers the value of expanding the aperture of the talent pipeline for more people, so that they are not just hiring from the same small pools of talent that they already have, which often just turns into a bloodbath for talent, and instead are looking to new pools of talent who may have been overlooked in the past, but have the skills necessary to succeed in the field. I often describe this as shifting employers' hiring mindset from hiring for mercenaries to hiring for missionaries. Because when you invest in somebody who maybe had been overlooked in the past, you often find that they're more loyal, they can be more productive, it leads to a stronger company culture. And so I do think we need to communicate to employers the value of hiring from either non-traditional backgrounds or just in ways that you haven't in the past. The other thing I'll say about why the market feels tough right now I wouldn't pin it on AI directly in the way that most people think. I think a lot of people hear the headlines about people maybe getting laid off because of AI. I actually think that's mostly a smokescreen for companies who wanted to downsize anyway, or they overhired. I don't actually think people are getting replaced straight up with AI, but I think we do see strong evidence that AI is starting to shift how work is being done and the types of skills that people need. And that means that in some cases, there's a disconnect between either the skills that people have learned or the skills that people have applied on the job in the past and what that needs to look like moving forward. I mentioned that on average, we see about a quarter of key skill requirements shift within cybersecurity just every 2 years. That has been accelerating, and much of it is being driven by AI-related skills, which are growing faster than almost any other skill we've ever tracked. So I think that is another issue right now, is that because of so much churn in the workplace, either employers are not always sure what they should be hiring for, or individuals might not have been able to update their skills as rapidly as necessary to meet the needs of employers. And I think there's also an argument to say you need employers to invest more heavily in training their own people, rather than just expecting people to come in the door with all the skills they need when it's moving so fast. That's a whole other conversation we could be having. But I think that those are two of the key challenges that I see as to why the market feels so tough for so many people right now.
The only thing I would add is, forward looking a little bit, is that I do think that as the people who are, so like on the offensive side of cyber, like our adversaries or the crime syndicates, they will use AI, they're gonna have people. So my sense is, for folks on the call, we will need people and need AI at the same time for cybersecurity, or else we'll fall behind. So in the long run, in an adversarial nature industry like cybersecurity with offensive and defensive, there's always like a cat and mouse kind of game. If the other side is using people in AI, our side will probably need people in AI. So my sense is that we'll still need folks, but because of the transitions and the industry just changing so much right now, so we're just going through a period of it.
We've got one more question regarding skill sets, and I think, Will, you might have answered this already, or it might have been UCU, about having a skill set. And they're asking, do you have to be certified, or is just having the skills good enough? So what is the best way to illustrate your level of skills if you're in the job market and you're looking for a position, or if you're looking to promote? What is your advice on that?
Yeah, happy to take a first crack at this one too. I think I would say you have to differentiate between having the skills and effectively signaling that you have the skills. There are many people who are incredibly capable, but for whatever reason, that doesn't pop out on a resume. I do think that certifications in the right context can be an effective way to help signal that you have certain skills or certain competencies. And in many cases, employers might value that. I would also say that's not the only route to signaling that you have proficiency. You mentioned earlier that if you can demonstrate you have strong on-the-job experience, or that you've been in certain settings where you've developed skill sets that feel tangible and presentable, whether it was doing community work, volunteer work for an organization. If you're earlier in your career, maybe competing in capture the flag competitions, things like that. I would say the more diversity that you have in how you can signal your competence, the better. So maybe certifications are one of the ways you do that. Maybe competing in capture the flag is another. Maybe having some projects or volunteer work you can highlight is another. And so the more diversity of experiences you can point to that signal your skill sets and frankly your well-roundedness, then I think the greater the likelihood that you're able to communicate effectively to employers just how skilled you really are.
You know what I just realized? Maybe one of the WiCyS members or sponsors would think about like a NFL combine, but for WiCyS cybersecurity combine, in which folks can kind of show off the skills, and then they get picked up, for a job. Just to toss it out there. If there are folks watching right now who may want to fund something like this.
Just as long as I don't have to run a 40-yard dash.
He was always thinking. I like it.
Nothing else to add other than that.
Yeah, I really have nothing to add on to that other than, boy, I mean, everything that Will said, and to be able to showcase that on a resume. How are you showcasing that in an effective way where employers are paying attention and really tapping into your network too on when you're looking for those employment opportunities, those that have witnessed your skills in action to be able to help validate that in your job seeking.
Definitely. And I think we've done a really good job, not only going over the basis of the research, but giving people some tips and tricks, and making sure that they're looking at the information as a way to not only get into the field, but be successful in the place that they're at. And I love, if you guys haven't picked up on it already, we've talked again and again about how partnership with organizations like WiCyS can provide those opportunities where your organization, the person that you're employed with, or the organization that you're with, might not have the opportunity to have something like a mentorship program or have those certification opportunities. And so there are ways that you can empower yourself, and we would definitely encourage you, if you are not already a member, to consider a membership within the organization, because we're very thoughtfully considering not only the areas that we've researched, but we also believe in the research that we're doing, and we're implementing it ourselves. When we have the opportunity to make data-informed decisions, we do that. And we're very transparent in how we do that, and always happy to share out that information. So thank you so much for everybody that was on the call today. We really appreciate your insights regarding this research, and the opportunity to share out these findings.
Yeah, thank you, Will. See you for joining us, and for FourOne Insights for the fabulous research, working with our community, understanding our community, really importantly, understanding the workforce needs, and really sharing this wholeheartedly with the WiCyS community and beyond to really drive the change that's needed and necessary. So we appreciate all your hard work. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And for those that came and took an hour out of their afternoon, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever part of the world that you're joining us from, we appreciate you being a part of the WiCyS webinar experience today. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will be signing off. If you have any additional questions about WiCyS, about FourOne Insights, you could go ahead and email info@wicys.org. That's info@WiCYS.org. So appreciate you all so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.